Okay, recording has begun, and we are sharing the presentation. We can see it, right? Cool. Okay, so first, I'm Connor McCormick. I am one half of the team that is building collective sense-making tools. Actually, 1/3 of the team. Caden is also here. Collective sense-making tools. The tool called the Negation game, the Negation game is basically to figure out what is true and then do stuff about it. Put in the simplest of terms, the negation game is a little bit like a prediction market. So I know all of you, and I know that you're familiar with prediction markets, but for people who might watch the recording, this is an example of a prediction market. It is basically a way for people to bet with real money about what kinds of events will happen in the future. So in this case, this was a prediction market that asked, will Biden end up finishing his term? And you can see that way back in July, there was some questions. Maybe he was going to step down. Maybe he was not going to live long enough. But now as we get closer and closer to the end of his term, this line has risen all the way up to 98% likelihood. And so you might look at this and think, what we love prediction markets because prediction markets are this really neutral way to find out what's likely to happen in the world. It requires people to put money where their mouth is. Anyone can participate who thinks that they have insight, and it aggregates all the information together into one single number. So you don't have to go and interview everybody who's involved. It's a really powerful tool. And so you might think, well, why, what if we could use prediction markets for even more ambiguous questions? I mean, this is a fairly objective question. What if the question we're trying to, this was a kind of market that we really resolve. Either it happens or it doesn't happen.
I don't know if
and
it was
agree. Biden is alive or dead.
Seems to be cutting. Your connection was bad, man.
I think it's just you. No, it might be me.
Pretty bad.
It might be me.
No.
Because you were cutting out and I wondered. Okay.
It's better now.
Yeah, most of that was good. It was just that
Yeah,
last set of statements that you were running through.
Okay. Let's see. Can you interrupt me if it happens again? Otherwise, I'll have to move to a different part of the house. All right. Thank you, Voki.
Cool.
So the second question that we were trying to answer is, was it the right move for Biden to pull out of Afghanistan? And this is a much more ambiguous question. We'd like to be able to answer it, but we can't just answer it with a market, because who gets to resolve this being the question? Who gets to resolve this in the end? And if you can't resolve it, then you can't have a market for it. How's my connection doing? Okay, still? So these are examples of questions where prediction markets fail. A question like, is the general theory of relativity true? A question like, should we send more money and weapons to Ukraine? A question like, how unhealthy is a sugary diet? A question like, did Rome collapse primarily due to population decline? All of these are not things that we can just resolve. We actually need some sort of process or method by which we come to weigh evidence. As you might say, well, duh, this is not what prediction markets are for. Prediction markets are check for questions. But what if you could? What if there was a way to weigh all of this evidence together? And so we believe what we're building with the negation game is a market for ambiguity, where the resolution criteria, because people play the game in self-interest, is it self-defines the resolution criteria. It weighs the relevant evidence or to push up or down different conclusions, or it can be used for taking actions. Like, for example, allocating capital, which means it must be incentive compatible, or it's entirely permissionless, meaning anyone can participate. You don't have to first get your or or you don't need some sort of accreditation. And finally, where it balances both the process of exploring what is true, so like collecting evidence, in the Biden Afghanistan question, what ended up happening in Afghanistan afterwards, with exploit, which is like, given what we know, how should we use that information? Should we do it again in the future? Should we come to the general conclusion that we shouldn't pull out of countries with unstable governments, whatever it might be? Balances that exploit trade-off. So this is our ambition with the negation game. It's like a lofty goal, because if we've done this, then we've also taken a really big step in the direction of creating a new kind of system of governance. And this is what it looks like today. You can visit negationgame.com, and you can see this is a proposal that Scroll DAO has tried to pass, and this is like a discussion of whether or not they should pass this proposal, right? And so you can see that it's being used right now for collective decision making inside of DAOs and organizations. But there's one really big catch to the tool. It looks very pretty. It's kind of given away right here by this thing that says negations, which is that all you can do inside of this game is you can make arguments that this statement is not true. And that's kind of a problem. And so it's kind of a problem because it feels really intuitive when you're arguing for something. Let's say you're trying to answer one of these questions: is general theory of relativity true, or how unhealthy is a sugary diet? It's really common for us to feel like the thing that I want to do is I want to argue for my side, right? To argue for the thing that I believe to be true. And so what I do is I come in here and I say, Scroll DAO should pass this proposal, and maybe I want to say all the reasons that I think that they should. But it turns out in the negation game, you cannot do that right now. And you can't do it for a technical reason that I want to show you, and then maybe we can release ourselves from this constraint. Because the negation game right now only permits negation. So here we have an example: the general theory of relativity is true. And then we have this counterpoint, and the counterpoint says that Eddington's experiment, I'll tell you what this is in a second, shows no deflection, right? So argument that is true, argument that it's not true. And if somebody wanted to express a supporting point, they would have to do this kind of awkward thing where they say the general theory of relativity is true, and then they would say a counterpoint, and then they'd say a counterpoint to the counterpoint, right? So this is down here is the pro, but they couldn't make a pro directly. They had to make it indirectly through this intervening statement. And that's really inconvenient. It's very common to want to express a reason to believe in something. And from a UI perspective, it's very inconvenient, because now you have to take 2 laborious steps to complete a common action. When it seems one step would have sufficed. Why not just let people make a pro? Maybe it'd be interesting to see what some of the answers are that you give. I don't know if anyone other than Volky has heard the argument for what the answer is. So I'm curious if anyone wants to hazard a guess.
Why? Can you restate the question? You want to know why does it have to be set up as a negation first, followed by a pro? Like, what's the functional reason required?
Yep. Why do you have to do this 2-step process instead of just allowing someone to directly make this pro beneath this one, so that this ends up like supporting that?
2 negatives make a positive.
True. It's something we can do, but if we could avoid doing it, we would. That's good. So 2 negatives make a positive. Why are we forced to do it?
If you just have the positive, you don't have the element of being able to test the hypothesis as well. Like the point of the negation is that you are making yourself open to counterfactuals, and like you can do the whole slashing mechanism that you always talked about. Anyways, yeah, I know that's not properly articulated, but I know it's somewhere along those lines.
That makes sense to me.
Benji's got inside knowledge.
On the risk of just going down a completely different path that is not what Benji's doing, but to say my own thoughts, maybe useful to you, Connor. Regardless, does it have to do something of creating a two-sided market similar to prediction, where like you cannot just kind of spiral off in one positive direction? There's you need the counterfactual to be able to push and pull weightings. Would be my best guess. And if otherwise, you just have a market that resolves to 100% of the time. And then you don't actually gain the sense making that you're trying to uncover.
Yep. So like you need a two-sided market so you have the adversity, so that there's so out of the conflict comes like results.
Not to jump too far ahead on you, but do you have, I've seen you do some cool imagery for how the mechanics of those things like work. Do you have anything that relates to explaining that visually? Because it's intuitive when he says it, once he says it, but if I could see it, it would actually like, I think it would be like salient, you know?
Sure. Yeah, maybe we do that now. I'll do a, so what you're saying is that you'd like to see it in action. And if you could see it in action, then you think that would help.
It would just help to see in action why that, like you can, you know, through action you can explain that mathematics, and that becomes like this visual cue. And you know, when I see a line move and it tugs the angle with it, and the angle changes or something like that, right? It's like,
yeah,
go, oh, I get it. I might not understand the proof behind it, but I get it.
Sure. I'll so what I'll do is I will share, I was gonna show a demo later, but let me show a demo now. And I think that this will help make it concrete. Okay, so here we're in the negation game. This is actually not the production version of the negation game. This is the one that Caden put together. So thank Caden in chat. We're going to make a little general relativity negation game here. So this will say the theory of general relativity is true. And I think it first gives us some alternative phrasings. It's fine. We're just going to go with our original. And then let's offer a negation. And the negation was there's contradictory evidence for general relativity. And then if we want to make our pro, let's see. If we want to make our pro, then we say general relativity has agreement with every single experimental test. So we go down here and we say something like, you can see that that same point has showed up again. That's because they're linked to one another. There's a way that we can make this a little less confusing, but they're all linked in two directions with one another. And so the last one that we had originally was the general theory has agreement with every single experimental test. Okay. So now we have all of our points in a graph. If this was in the production version, I could actually show you the graph and how they all link together, but we need these features in here, which are these little triangles. So these triangles allow us to say, let's actually add one additional one. The other statement that we had was Eddington's experiment. Eddington's experiment shows no visual deflection of stars. So Eddington's experiment was an experiment that Arthur Eddington did in, I think it was 1919 in Argentina. He went down to Argentina during a solar eclipse, and he took pictures of the sun during the solar eclipse. And what should have happened, what general relativity would predict, is that some of the stars that were normally, in other places in the sky should have been closer to the sun because of the lensing that's caused by gravity. And so this was considered the first substantial test of general relativity. And Einstein said, I think that this is true, that the theory of general relativity is true. So he staked against it. But then he also said, if he was in communication with Eddington, he said, Eddington, if it turns out that there's no deflection of stars, then I'm completely wrong, right? And so what this is doing, what this little triangle does, is it allows Einstein to say, if you do this experiment and you don't see that thing, I will completely change my mind. Here we're putting the impact at 100%. And you see that in the game, what we do is we give a little bit of extra influence to players. We give them this this bonus score. The score is called favor, in exchange for saying the ways that they would change their mind, right? And so Einstein can submit this. I'm casually playing as Einstein here, whatever. And so this is half of the mechanism of epistemic leverage, or the key mechanism inside the negation game. The other half you might notice is what if Einstein's really untrustworthy, and he says something like, I say that he says he would change his mind, but then people are like, Einstein, we don't think that you're actually going to change your mind, right? We think you're just going to stick to your guns. That's what this little triangle with a slash through it is for. So someone else can come along here. I'm going to pick on Dawufi is going to be our doubter. Okay, so Dawufi comes along and is calling Einstein's bluff, and what he's doing is he's doubting Einstein. And so when he doubts, he says, I don't think that you're actually ever going to change your mind, Einstein. And he's paid out APY out of Einstein's pocket, actually, in exchange for every day that Einstein doesn't change his mind. And you can see here that it will take 11 or 7 days until Dawufi breaks even on this bet that Einstein's not going to change his mind. And so when Dawufi does that, it actually is pulling down the favor, that bonus favor that Einstein got, right? And so Einstein is now less influential than he was before, because we don't actually think he's capable of changing his mind. We think he's biased, or maybe he's doing it in ways to get his way. Okay, so we submit that, and I don't actually think the graph updates yet. That's the next thing that we're building out. But that gives you an ability to see how the mechanism works. Okay, so our purpose in doing that would give a demo so you could see how the mechanism works. Any questions about that, Devin? How much does that help?
100%. Yeah, made it a lot more clear.
Cool. Anyone else have questions about this before we go back to why can we only play this game with negations? Or maybe it gives you some new ideas as to why we can only play this game with negations.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I liked it as a negation to begin with, but maybe I'm weird. So
you liked it as only negations?
Yeah, I don't like compliments are meaningless. Like I can't take shit from that, right? So it's like I don't need your support on the thing. I need to know what the fuck you don't like about this, so we can figure out whether this is good or not. You know?
Okay,
that's right.
On that note, I have a question on this, because there's in that UI you just showed, Connor, there's the endorse button, I believe. Functionally, that's kind of the same thing as giving a. Does it not have the same functional effect as making a point that suppoints the point?
Well, if you had another point, let's say that you have a point which is I think there was one that we wanted to connect, which is the general theory of relativity agrees with all experiments, right? Then that clearly is more detailed than just this high level statement. Like it's more of like a reason why the theory of general relativity is true, right? It's a reason for it. Am I freezing?
Okay, yeah, I guess my question is, maybe this is wrong, but like, if you can endorse the original point, right, then like, why shouldn't there be additional signal value to get from like a person making a sub point that supports the original point as like an additional endorsement that's like has the same, does that make sense? Like, as long as you have some negations, like, is there any harm, I guess, if it's already being accepted as a premise of the game that you can endorse the original point?
Right. This is exactly what Volky is saying. Volky's like,
I see.
clearly this is a
Yeah.
this is clearly it's useful to be able to kind of unbundle this high level statement into these lower level statements. And so I want to show you that's a great
Wait, Connor.
push.
I'm
Really
sorry, I
quick.
didn't mean to interrupt you. Question for you.
Go
Kind
ahead.
of going off what Benji said. If we were doing like mathematical reasoning, right, we could say A then proves B, which then proves C. But since we're doing something more empirically based here, what we in theory have to do is say that like the counterfactual is not true, because we can't say it applies to all the use cases, right? So if we were operating within a sandbox, I feel like we could actually add just direct positives. But since it's dealing with empirical evidence, it feels like that might be where some of the disconnect lies. Is that crazy?
Yeah. That like simple predicate logic is much easier to do than like the kind of like empirical reasoning that you want to do. So like Bayesian logic and counterfactual reasoning are much more complicated, and most of the information, back to Devin's point, is in the negatives. So it's in like the ways you could find out that you're wrong. You know, so like the black swan thing. We have never seen a black swan, and so far we've seen most of the Earth. Therefore, there are no black swans. Right? It's just like not how it works. The statement "we believe there are no black swans" like sits open as like this potentially really large bounty for a long time, until finally somebody comes along and is like, "Okay, I've been to Australia and there I saw the black swans." And so this is a good point. This isn't actually how I argued for it. I wonder how much it holds. But yeah, thanks for bringing that up. So like propositional logic doesn't do like empirical reasoning or like counterfactual reasoning. I saw Coco joined. Hi, Coco.
Hi, Connor.
There's also-
Friends.
There's something that came up for me, Connor, in that discussion just now around falsibility. You know, so that would be an argument for kind of leaning into negations, because you can never conclusively prove something, but you can falsify it. But then on the other hand, like that evidence-based discussion, like that would be more on the pro side, right? Like but then again, like yeah, I'm not sure how these connect, but that's what comes up.
Yeah. No worries, Coco. We'll try and get you up to speed. Yeah, I think that's right. You can't ever, like science says you can't ever conclusively prove something. And so by focusing only on negations, we invite people to engage in falsification instead of in kind of like confirmation bias. And that's also back to what Dawufi says, which is that you know, you need a two-sided market in order for it to be adversarial, and you don't get information from it. So with that, I think you've almost covered all of the things that I came up with for, well, I'll just show you the reasons that you might expect. So the reasons you might expect are epistemological reasons. This is what you're saying, Jan. You can't conclusively prove something. You might expect promoting self-critique, right? So we actually want people to engage in this process of finding out how they could be wrong. And by structuring it this way, we kind of invite them into that. Maybe we did it for UI constraints, right? It's kind of nice that in this system, there's only one kind of connection between things, and it's a negating connection. You don't have to have a pro and a con side, or somehow figure out different like visual affordances for that. Maybe we just did it for simplicity, and maybe we did it for how we like apportion the favor. And I'll just run through these really quickly. So epistemological reasons, Jan, science is based on falsifiability. You cannot prove something, you can only prove it. Maybe this encodes that as part of, this is not actually the reason why we didn't add this. I think that this is correct, but it's not clear to me that adding pros makes it so that you can't do this. I think that you can still just have you'll still have cons elsewhere because people will still disagree with things. Self-critique, confirmation bias is a powerful, maybe the most powerful cognitive bias. With only negations, when a user clicks on a point that they like, they're immediately shown reasons that counter this bias. And so maybe this nudges them towards curiosity and self-critique. Uh-oh, is my screen no longer sharing?
It's sharing.
Oh, looks
I
like
see
it
it.
stopped. It's reasons you might expect, unless you're moving that around.
Here we go.
Oh.
This is, if I change this, yeah, okay. So this is not it. It's not self-critique. UI constraints. Other platforms like Kialo support both pros and cons, but this requires a user interface to kind of be like partitioned. Maybe it makes things more complex. I think we can find a way around this. Voki in particular thinks we can find a visual way to handle this. Simplicity. Lots of arguments on behalf of simplicity, including I really especially like this one down here. Just think it's really, really well said. But that's not the reason. Not to improve on what Ralph Waldo Emerson here. And finally, apportioning favor. When you have pros pointing to a con, and these pros also have their own cons, how much should the favor of these new cons affect the favor of the original cons? So basically, like as they become entangled with one another, how do you like sort out the accounting for that? And the answer here is sort of, and that's sort of what both you were saying, Voki or Benji, and what you were saying, Dawufi, which is like the one really good reason to worry is because of this game theoretic constraint. And this is where my presentation breaks. And you get to look at the cute angel game theory while I bring up the next one. But actually, maybe it's useful to pause there and see, did anything come up for you in that section? Are you good to hear are you good to hear the reasoning for what the main problem is?
I just had a comment or two around like UX or UI stuff, because I think all you could like, I don't know what the right answer is, but you're basically just flipping the coin over and then starting like its inverse tree to give someone the understanding of like how to create the pro. And you don't need to like describe all that to me. If you just flip it over and extend it another way, like I kind of visually get what just happened. I'm like going the other side of the coin. Anyway,
oh, funny. So the pros are like on top or something, and the cons are beneath.
Yeah, some sort of like visual arrangement does it for me though, because like I said, it's just like it seems like you're just running from the flip side of the same coin. So, and you're just kind of inverting it for a hot second to kick it off. I don't know. Anyway,
that's cool. That's cool. I don't think we thought of that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Another point is that like having an opinion on this and like incentivizing you to actually participate into like endorsing or making a negation oftentimes requires like the creation of the idea that the person has like a perceived edge. And so like maybe the inspiration of seeing like the other side of the argument gives you the confidence to then like make that negation, right? Like oftentimes people make trades not because like they have a particular conviction on the trade, but because they have particular conviction that the other side is dumb. And so like I think that's potentially another UI UX reason why like pros could be interesting in that context, but I know that's not the point of this conversation, so I'll pause.
Oh, that's interesting.
I've got one more. I don't know if it's a UI UX or just, I don't know if this breaks it, but it's the first thing that came to me. And I'm super curious with the game theory, but since you're pausing while it's still fresh in my head, wouldn't it also theoretically be possible just to have someone state the counterfactual as part of the original source, and then you can go on negating in two trees and then have them sort of roll up against each other? Or maybe it's not. That's
Okay, so you can state
that popped into my head. Yeah, just to corroborate.
if you have to stay with
So,
negations. If we end at the point where you
say,
have to do negations. So Einstein. So when you put in, you say Einstein's theory of relativity is true. AI pops up and says, we suggest this is your counterfactual. Einstein's relativity is not true. And then you go down two negation trees that sort of roll up to fighting against each other. So you basically bootstrap the two-sided market that I was thinking about in this game theory situation, or I'm curious to see exactly what happens. But this is another UI potential, because I do think, was it Cunningham's, like people, like the fastest way to find out if you're wrong is say it on the internet, say something wrong on the internet and someone tell you the right way to do it, right? It's like that. Like my first thought was, what if you just said the wrong thing and then everyone argues against you, right? And then you've like accomplished your goal of supporting your own point. But then you could probably do that for both, and then everyone will love to jump in and say why the other side is wrong, and you'll get the two trees. It'll probably be all cons, so it might be a little bit strange. I'm not sure how that fragments like conversation, but I think it's at least an interesting approach to the idea that you need negations, so just put both up, and then see which one gets negated harder.
Just like Instagan, right? It's just like you're just popping up a general adversarial network like right off the bat on it.
Instagan.
Instagan.
This guy doesn't know how to post videos on Instagram, but he's got this shit in his back pocket. All right, I'm done.
Okay, so just to make sure I understand it, you're saying we have some statement, relativity is true, and then you're saying you can just have the AI offer the inverse of every statement, and then now those two things kind of can sit next to each other. And then if you want to add a pro, you can just implicitly add it as a con for the inverse, right? And so it's still the same data structure underneath, but it's like it's just like kind of papered over so that the user doesn't have to think about it.
Yeah, and my left brain go to market. It's like, I don't know, it's fine. That's what I usually have to add for the conversation. Is like, engagement wise, this is great, right? Because people love telling someone else why they're wrong. It's the quickest way to get the comment section to blow up. It's like, this guy's a fucking idiot, which I think we were bumping up against with Mr. Fong. It's like, you know, I'm like, if someone's like, I'm like, oh, I agree with that, that's cool, and someone's like, oh, but this experiment shows this. I was like, dude, this guy doesn't know anything about experiments. I have to go tell him why he's wrong. I expect much stickier user behavior.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah. Okay, so you're kind of putting this is funny. You're putting a pro in the column for negations.
Wrong. Very quickly.
We pause. You're putting a column for negations because people love to tell other people that they're wrong.
This is the biggest, as a go-to-market guy, this is the biggest pro I could possibly offer.
Go-to-market is
The one.
Oh, Chad has a XKCD. Let's
Perfect.
I
we're all
knew which one it
religious
was
here,
before I
so
even opened it.
we have to, you know, when we see an XKCD, we take the pilgrimage.
Classic.
Classic. Number 386. That one we should just have memorized. How bad is my internet connection? Am I cutting out a lot, or is it manageable?
It gets really good and then it deteriorates for a little bit, but then you come back pretty smoothly. So right now it's working decently.
Okay. I'll try not to move. Maybe that will help. Perfect. Okay. Okay, so let me show you the two reasons that I'm worried about negations. The key problem that we have to solve is that we're building a market for weighing evidence. And that must be because we know how much influence to give to each piece of evidence. And so then, oh, you are not seeing my screen change, so I must need to share it again. Now it's changing, right? Yeah. We're building a market for weighing evidence. That must be because we know how much influence. So how do we get there? So this is the epistemic leverage mechanism that I just showed, the one that that I just did the demos for. And so we'll run through this really quickly because you've already seen this. But essentially, we give more influence if somebody says that they're going to change their mind. We're not actually building a game on the level of weighing the data itself. Instead, we're building the game on the level of incentives. So we like use incentives as kind of the bottom layer, the foundation on which we build the rest of the system. And the only incentive that we have access to identify is somebody going to change their mind. So we have general theory of relativity is true. Eddington's experiment shows no deflection. Einstein buys this one. And he also says he would change his mind if this were true, just like we did in the experiment or in the demo. And so you see, Einstein stakes, Einstein restakes, and that favor is increasing as Einstein takes that action. He's being rewarded in order for increasing kind of like the surface area for invalidation of his point. And so this is where I was going to show you the demo, but I think you're right, Devin, it was much better to put earlier. So that's the incentive backdrop at which we're doing this. There should be 4 things that you got out of that, which was that Einstein can stake. Einstein can then restake to get bonus score. Dawoofy can come along and doubt Einstein to Einstein's detriment. And then finally, if Einstein ever does self-slash, then Dawoofy gets slashed as well. So the money is lost that he bet against Einstein. And where does that money go? Right now, we imagine that money that both Einstein and Dawoofy lost, that goes to the people who took the alternative position, right? So the people who said that Eddington's experiment shows no deflection, if Dawoofy staked against this and then doubted Einstein, then when Einstein self-slashes, that money and Dawoofy's money goes back into this pot. And so what's exciting about this, the reason that we currently imagine that this is how we do it, is because it is a really cool way to pay out people who provide information to the network. So somebody comes along, right? Benji, this is like back to information markets. Somebody comes along and they come up with Eddington's experiment and they buy a whole bunch of shares in it because they think it's true. Well, now, if it becomes kind of all bundled up in Einstein restaking, saying that this actually is informative, then when there is self-slashing, when it actually proves to be informative, that person gets a really big payout. And so if you're a journalist or if you're an independent researcher, this gives you this new kind of revenue stream in order for providing information or facts. Or if you're a scientist, this gives you a new kind of revenue stream for providing information or facts to the market. Whereas typically it's very hard to get paid for that. Typically you want to keep all of that information quiet, right? You want to keep it to yourself because if you give away the information, then somebody else can use it to make a profit instead of you being able to use it to make a profit. So this is exciting, and this is why we want to have that slashing, when it's slashed, go to the holders of the counterpoint. Okay, so if you understand those 4 things, then you understand everything that we wanted to explain. Sweet, thanks for being here, Vinny. And I think we can wrap up in 10. This has taken much longer than I expected. we can finally answer the question, why do we only permit negations? We see like our familiar setup, and we see that two issues arise. The first is this issue of double support, and then the second is the issue of making irrelevant arguments. And the second is more or less the thing that you said, Benji. And the first is kind of a technical problem. So the first double support is just, okay, let's say Einstein stakes the first one and then restakes the second one, and then goes ahead and stakes the second one and restakes the first one. So now what had some amount of support. And now, now that he's restaked, it like should increase even more. And this one should also increase even more. And this feedback loop is kind of awkward. It doesn't cause it to go on forever, but it causes it to like kind of like do this. Both of them kind of like bounce around. And it's unclear whether that's okay. See you in Telegram. Thanks, Chad. It's unclear whether that's okay. So this is the first part of the issue. You can read this if you'd like, but essentially, we want to give additional influence for people saying, I would change my mind if I see this very likely thing happening. And,
Your slide didn't,
so if they were to say
didn't advance. Oh, there it is.
Here we go. So if they say instead, I'll change my mind if I see a flying pig, we don't find that informative, and we don't want the network to reward that because we don't think they're going to see a flying pig. And so with negations, you get bonus favor for saying when a probable thing would change your mind. With pros, we think it would be the other way around. When you say you would change your mind for something improbable, you get more influence, right? So if you say, I would change my mind, you know, I believe that the earth is flat, but I would change my mind if we saw pictures of the flat earth from, or if we didn't see pictures of flat earth from space, then, you know, those, if we only really want to give bonus influence, if we don't think that that's what we're going to see. Once again, back to this idea of like, you want the reverse polarity. So this is the first part. This is probably the small problem, is it does weird things to our algorithm and it causes this, like, it jumps up and then it goes down and then it kind of like settles out. This is issue number one. And then issue number two, which is the much bigger issue, which is the thing you brought up, Benji and Dawufi, is, and to some degree, Jan and Devin as well, is that they are, if somebody makes, like, we're kind of relying on this restaking that Einstein is doing as evidence that these two things are related to one another. And we think that they're related to one another because those two are in conflict. And we know that Einstein doesn't want, you know, in the case of a negation, we know that Einstein does not want his opposing people to get paid out. But now, because Einstein is staking and then restaking here, but has also staked down here, if Einstein ever does self-slash, that money just goes right back to him. And so, and even if it doesn't go right back to him, you know, it maybe goes to his friends. And so, you know, here, this statement here is a strongly false statement. We don't believe that this is true. So we think it should give a large restaking bonus, but it's totally irrelevant. And probably Einstein and all of his friends have all like staked in this. And so now they can very safely restake, and they can very safely get all this bonus influence up here. And if ever anyone doubts them, they can very safely doubt, and slash, and they'll take all of that money themselves. And so now there's no longer, now it's no longer informative when Einstein restakes. And so this is the big problem of pros, and it is it's the problem that I present to you today. And it comes right back to exactly what y'all said, which is that with negations, there's more information in the restaking because the two ideas are in opposition. It's exactly what you said, Dawufi, and what you said, Benji. The flat earthers don't want the point there are pictures of the earth from space which show a round earth. They don't want that point to win. And so when they say that they would change their mind about it, it's actually informative, right? It's actually listening to the people who are kind of neutral or objective. And when they restake to say, I changed my mind if there aren't pictures of Earth that show a flat Earth, it's really difficult to doubt them, because this is a pro. It's really difficult to doubt them because it's hard to doubt them when they're just going to get their money back as soon as they self-slash. So that causes doubting to no longer be a safe thing to do. And so it isn't informative. So we've made it. Go ahead, Devin.
Yeah, I have a question about it, the game in practice. So
yep.
I hear all that, how that works out. The question that's swirling through my mind is, once we're in the fray, the thick of it, and you're making points and you're counteracting points. Let's say we're all highly engaged. My question is, do I as a participant know where my advantages lie, or do I have to understand that intuitively to navigate the game? Do you know what I'm asking?
Mm-hmm. So do I know whether or not space photos show a flat Earth as a player?
Do the staking and the restaking, the incentives behind the introduction of literal incentives has its own influencing factor, right? And if it's difficult because they could actually come in tension of each other. My incentives could be in tension against my intent to make a point, right? For whatever reason, there could be externalities that create that, but like I could have that conflict. And so my question is, like, do I understand the relationship of these things? Am I exposed to it such that so that it is influencing my decision, or is that part being handled so that I'm always optimized for the path that I'm pursuing? I hope I'm asking that specifically enough.
I think what you're asking is, do you have to play a strategic game, or can you play a straight game? Is that sort of what you're asking?
That is so much better said. That is exactly it. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. You should play with this game. We believe that it's incentive compatible so that you can play, or our goal is that it's incentive compatible so that you can play a straight game. So that if there is hidden information and there's an outcome that you care about, your optimal move is to reveal that information. Now, that's not always going to be true. If you really, really care about a particular outcome, if you're an oil company, you still have an incentive to hide that information, but now you have some little additional bit of incentive to reveal it, right? So
you've actually got a good sort of moral tension there where you can make your choice a little more plainly.
Right.
No, I'm literally choosing this direction. This is more important for whatever reason.
Yeah, you have a little more incentive to reveal the private information than you do in a typical environment, just because if you reveal it, then you'll be you'll gain in credibility and you'll gain in influence, essentially.
And I guess if just to go like I drank the Kool-Aid sort of thing, and they'd be incentivized to do it in a net positive way, not just like a singular one-off can get a payday. I mean, they might treat it that way, but the net addition is, if there's a payday out of it, then it's a net benefit sort of contribution to the info state.
That's right. Well, and because they can also buy shares that they think is going to end up winning. So if they think that it's likely that we do produce fewer fossil fuels, they can actually get upside on that outcome as well. And so this gives them, now they're stuck between the tension of, do I make the money off of the oil itself, or do I make the money off of the point growing in economic value? And so it helps to arbitrage essentially that what was previously a pure incentive to maximize production.
Yeah, the better exposed to hidden incentives.
Right. or better, it might not expose them, but it like it counteracts them. Yeah.
Question here. On the subject at hand, if there's a world where you can make pros 2 points, but the people that make the original point aren't actually able to restake to the supporting point. I assume that might solve the problem, but I also assume it might be a Sybil issue. Is that correct?
I think that it is a relevance issue.
Yeah.
Because we use restaking as evidence that 2 points should be in a market together, that they should compete against one another. And so if we lose that signal, that restaking signal, I see that I'll really be repeat what might not come through. We use restaking as evidence of relevance. And so if we lost the relevance signal, we might not know anymore whether they're in competition.
What I'm saying is restaking should be negation based. Right? And I'm not suggesting like getting rid of the restaking. I'm saying that like clearly for UI UX and a bunch of reasons we kind of like peppered over this like session, like being able to have people say, yeah, I agree, can be like good. That maybe it's just about separating that from the restaking. And maybe that's like too simple a point, but
well, you said something interesting there too, which is I think you brought up the point that you could have a scenario where the OP couldn't actually afford to restake, and then that actually brings up a weird conflict for them, because they could maybe they could, their incentives could shift if they don't have skin in the game in the same way. I don't know.
Hey Connor, it seems like we could do all pro, or we could all do all negative. Just like in science, you come up with a theory and you go to work to prove your theory, which I think emotionally is driven to be successful in that idea. But having it just all negative forces, again, we go to work to prove that the theory is wrong. And I think that's fine. I don't see the need for both pro and con. Just go with one. And the con seems to make more sense to me, just to focus on the negation. Maybe you need to do the negation game on the negation idea.
Oh, we have. Boki, maybe you respond. Thanks, Dad.
Yeah.
Benji or Boki, maybe you have a response to this.
I'll try.
Oh, you're sick. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I've been saving up my voice until now because, as you can see, I don't have much to spare. But I think my main point regarding all this discussion is that we can have the pros of including pro relationships without the downsides by just ignoring them when calculating any metric that matters, like the game theoretical mechanisms that we have can just disregard pros. And I still think offering UI affordance for pros would offer users a much more intuitive UI that would not require domain-specific knowledge. And also, I think that pros can work very well as stepping stones for people to discover new negations, because it's just like Benji said, sometimes if you post something that tells people about your side of the discussion, that could prompt them into adding their own negations. And I think This is a very good way of adding more momentum to the discussion and making sure that more people take part in it. So
Yeah, couldn't agree more, Volky. I think that like from what you've presented, Connor, purely from the game theoretical mechanism design standpoint, I mean, it's very hard to get. It's really hard for me to think about something that could fix this fundamental limitation about the restaking and the pros and that breaking the loop. But like to Volky's point, like I mean, I see a lot of ways in which having pros and like the accessibility and the information that that generates to create negations and to move a conversation forward and to incentivize people to actually bet on what they believe in could like really benefit the platform.
There is also, just to add something here, if a in the
What's my
negation.
concern? Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say that a pro could still be leveraged as a negation of a negation. If then somebody, right, for default, it doesn't influence the game theory, but somebody could kind of link it up as epistemic leverage for a negation, I guess. Even if that's not the person who made the point. I don't know how hard that would be, but that's just another idea there.
Yeah, it's a good idea. It makes me wonder. One thing I've never tried is I've never actually just tried taking the math and accordioning it into one thing, so that like you can restake, but you can restake to a pro through like a virtual con. And I've never actually tried to do that. That's a really interesting idea. It should have been obvious, but sometimes, you know.
Are you
Caden?
saying, Connor, that you
Go ahead.
you basically can make your pro a con, right? I mean, that's what I think you could do.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And I think they might just end up being less. They might tend to be less influential on average because they're like one step further away. But maybe that's fine. Okay, I'll play with it. Thanks, Benji, for being here. Thank you for weighing in.
Of course. Can't wait for the next one.
Take care, my friend. Bye. Caden?
Yeah. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, gotcha.
I was of the opinion that we should probably stick with negations. I get the appeal of pros, but if we're just going to end up ignoring them all in the calculations anyway, and the main attraction is to like bring in more attention and onboarding for new users, I don't really see the reason for adding all that complexity when a simpler solution might suffice. And I agree with pretty much every other point that I think negations are enough implicitly through the existing mechanisms we have.
Cool. Thank you. All right. Anything else that I think that this doesn't quite leave us with a conclusion. I was hoping that we would, I was really hoping we would, I would bake this and I'd be like, oh, okay, we actually don't need these. And I could just present on why I was wrong. I'm still left with a little bit of like an open question. And I'm curious if anyone has any way that they'd like to wrap us up. If not, I will end the recording here. And then if you have anything else to add, that's fine. And for anyone who's watching the recording, if you want to get in touch, either because you're interested in this subject or you're interested in the negation game more broadly, or you're interested in tools for collective sense making and pricing externalities, then you can find us on you can find me at least on Twitter as Connor MCMK and on Farcaster as Nor, N-O-R. And then just feel free to DM there. Okay, goodbye to people watching the recording. Thanks for watching.